Yesterday, I spoke about apophasis. It is a concept where you describe things by saying what it is not rather than what it is. The reason this might be useful is because there are actually many things in life that are very amorphous, very nebulous. If you try really hard to reduce them into labels, into words, you often would define them wrongly. I used the analogy yesterday to say that these things are akin to what water is for fish, what air is for human beings. I gave three examples. The first one I gave was those moments when everything went well, those moments when nothing went bad, those moments when bad things never happened, such as when you are approaching a traffic light, the traffic light turns green, when you are shopping for grocery, you are about to pay, and there is a counter, a lane with absolutely no one. You could be the first person. Those moments when you wake up in the morning, nothing goes wrong. You don't have toothache, you don't have stomach ache, you don't have sprained ankle, you don't have migraine. Everything went so well. You don't notice, right? At least my personal experience confirms that. I only realized how well functioning my legs were during the day I sprained my ankle. The second example I gave is a series of social convention. Why are computer keyboards in the format of QWERTY? Why do people write from left to right instead of the opposite? Why do kids and women follow the surnames of men? Why are most societies operating of monogamy? The third example I gave is lots of people fantasize about what if I were born in the greatest country or the greatest economy today. And I debunked that by saying that if you were born in those countries, it is also very likely that you would have to undergo the worst periods in those countries, or at least your ancestors had to undergo those, and chances are your ancestors couldn't survive and you might not exist today. I give examples such as the bubonic plague and Black Death in Europe, the Great Famine and the Great Cultural Revolution in China. Those are the three examples about things that are quite apophatic, very hard to describe using words, very hard to describe things that did not happen. Why is it important to talk about apophatic things? I think a first reason is curiosity, second reason is for critical thinking, but third reason is to be able to discover new things or to be able to debunk things that you thought they are true. Human minds, right, our brains, right, have this odd dichotomy. Whatever we could sense using our six senses, such as five senses, such as our eyes, our ears, our smell, olfactory, whatever we could sense, right, we treat them, and also our touch, all right, our touch sense using our hands or legs or skin, whatever we could sense, we treat them as true, we treat them as existent. And conversely, whatever we couldn't sense, we, at least in the near future, we treat them as non-existent, or at the very least, we don't think about them. However, okay, that makes a lot of sense, especially when we were hunter-gatherer. We had no time to think about things that are too far away. We only care about our survival, imminent survival. However, this dichotomy could bring a lot of trouble at certain times. For example, a lot of times we have this optical illusion, things that we could see, but actually they are not in existence. Not only that, there are a lot of mental illusion. There is a book called Thinking Fast and Slow. It documented a lot about all this mental illusion. And in the opposite, on the other hand, things that we don't sense, things that we haven't seen, doesn't mean that they don't exist. So that's the reason why housing bubbles, stock market collapse, all these things happen, right? Because people thought that the price would keep rising, so I would join it. People thought that people never see price dropping, so they don't think that it would happen. And other things in physics, we don't know what is inside the smallest particle. We don't know what is fourth dimension, so we treat them as not as non-existent. Hence, I think our apparatus, our brain is quite faulty in certain aspects. So it is important to talk about apophatic things to make more discovery, to correct ourselves, to find out things that we don't notice, and or to notice things that to unnotice things that we actually thought they exist. Today I'm going to talk about two more examples other than the three examples I gave yesterday. The fourth example about social media. Yesterday I spoke briefly about all the features on social media that we take it for granted. So we want to imagine what if they don't exist. Alright, all certain features that what if they existed. Yesterday I spoke about 10 years ago you couldn't like a comment on Facebook. And 10 years ago, definitely there wasn't Instagram story, and you couldn't message people on Instagram. 10 years ago, you couldn't know whether a WhatsApp message has been sent or received or seen or not. 10 years ago, WhatsApp didn't have that subtle feature, whether it's one tick or two ticks. We all know today what does that feature actually mean. I'm not too sure 10 years ago on WhatsApp could you see whether a person is currently online or not, or whether a person is currently typing. The typing triple dot, that actually is quite obnoxious. It gives me a lot of jittery feeling, especially when you are texting your employer, your enemy, or your crush. And then today on Messenger, you could actually hold a message and then you could react using an emoji. 10 years ago, you definitely couldn't do that. And then there are also other scary features such as on Snapchat, if you screenshot a message, another person could know. On LinkedIn, you could know who has viewed your profile. All these features, right? If you observe the history, all these features were added gradually, years by years by years. All right, and I personally think that it is giving more and more and more information. Right, because 10 years ago you couldn't know whether a person is currently online or not. Now you have a new piece of information. You know he or she is online. 10 years ago, you couldn't know whether the message has been sent, but now you could know. And you keep adding new information. 10 years ago, you couldn't know whether a comment is popular or not, because that you couldn't know how many likes does a comment receive. But you could know that you have more and more nuance, more and more new information. But also, actually those features are actually quite superfluous, quite unnecessary. That's why we say that we are living in an era of overload of information. Because if you think about that, right, I myself reflect 10 years ago, if I send a message, if I couldn't know whether a person has seen it or not, so what? I could wait. If he or she doesn't reply, I could call him or her. I don't need that. And 10 years ago, if I couldn't react to a message using emoji, I could write using words, oh, this is funny. I don't have to react using an emoji. So all these features are quite superfluous. I think the whole thing is very inadvertent because the companies running all this social media, they are businesses. They need to generate profit, and as a result, year by year, they have the pressure to launch new feature. And of course, those features cost addiction. Uh, it actually, I don't know what to say, but I suspect those features spur a lot of conflict, unnecessary conflict, and also it causes people to be very queasy. You're craving for more and more certainty. You want more. You want people to react to your emoji. You want people to like your comments. So what I want to say here is, what if you imagine those features don't exist? We take it for granted today, but I would definitely miss those days when I sent a message, I couldn't know whether it has been sent or not. Of course, you could argue, or during natural disaster, for example, it's important to know whether a person is safe or not. But other than that, in your everyday life, I don't think those features are important. In fact, it is just too much. And also, sometimes I find myself clicking into a YouTube video precisely because I could see how many views has such video already gained. What if those data is hidden? I couldn't know whether this video is popular, this is unpopular. I need to judge based on merits, all right? If I couldn't know whether a video has received a lot of views already or not, I will generally judge based on that video itself. So all these things, right, the social media feature is worth pondering. What if the opposite happened? We don't have comment liking, we don't have emoji, we don't have blue ticks, we don't have number of views on YouTube videos. And this leads to the fifth thing I want to talk about, the apophatic things. The fifth thing I want to talk about is things that you can't find on Google, things that you can't see behind the scene of social media companies, of internet, things that have been censored. Every single day, YouTube and Facebook have to ban so many accounts, have to censor so many videos. We don't really know. Rumors say that there are a lot of child pornography, there are violence video, people beheading other humans, terrorism groups. All these things are actually extremely apophatic because those social media companies would not allow those content to be seen at all. They hire thousands of moderators to do those dirty work of censoring things. And so it's worth thinking, what are things you cannot find on Google? It's very befuddling, right? Things you can't find on Google. And I'm often quite infatuated with this kind of paradoxical question. For example, you ask what you should not Google on Google, or what you can't say. Because when you ask the question what you can't say, no one could answer it, because the moment that person answers something that he or she can't say, then he or she is in deep trouble. So it's worth thinking all these apophatic things behind the scene in Twitter, in Facebook, and in Google. What are things that have been hidden? Not only that, you also want to think about how do people behind the scene in Google, Facebook, in Facebook or Twitter, how did they decide the process of giving blue ticks or not, to disband a group or not? What are the policies to that led them to make this kind of decisions? And not only that, just now I talk about things that you can't Google. In general, what are things that you can't say? You probably, one way to figure out all these things is by looking at books that are banned, movies that are banned. This is sort of a vicarious way to find out this truth. But of course, the most sinister version is that if a book or a movie or a YouTube account has been banned since its inception at the very beginning, then no one would know it. Very, very hard. Maybe except a few moderators in those social media companies. So this is something quite apophatic, I think, worth asking and worth imagining. And yeah, so I think these are the 5 apophatic examples I could think about currently. And I'll stop here and see you tomorrow.